head long, horn short, to be the Nzo antelope, discovered by Speke in Uganda, and whose Latin designation is, according to Dr. Sclater, Tragelaphus speecia. It has a short bushy tail and long hair along the spine. A long march in a west by north direction, lasting 6 hours, through a forest where the sable antelope was seen, and which was otherwise prolific with game, brought us to a stream which ran by the base of a lofty conical hill, on whose slopes flourished quite a forest of feathery bamboo. On the 20th, leaving our camp, which lay between the stream and the conical hill above mentioned, and surmounting a low ridge which sloped from the base of the hill cone, we were greeted with another picturesque view, of cones and scarped mountains, which heaved upwards in all directions. A march of nearly 5 hours through this picturesque country brought us to the Mpokwa River, one of the tributaries of the Rungwa, and to a village lately deserted by the Wazavira. The huts were almost all intact, precisely as they were left by their former inhabitants. In the gardens were yet found vegetables, which, after living so long on meat, were most grateful to us. On the branches of trees still rested the lares and the penates of the Wazavira, in the shape of large and exceedingly well made earthen pots. In the neighboring river one of my men succeeded, in few minutes, in catching 60 fish of the Silurus species, with the hand alone. A number of birds hovered about the stream, such as the white-headed fish-eagle and the kingfisher, enormous snowy spoonbills, ibis, martins, etc. This river issued from a mountain clump 8 miles or so north of the village of Mpokwa, and comes flowing down a narrow thread of water, sinuously winding amongst tall reeds and dense brakes on either side of the home of hundreds of antelopes and buffalo. South of Mpokwa the valley broadens, and the mountains deflect eastward and westward, and beyond this point commences the plain known as the Rikwa, which, during the Masika, is inundated, but which, in the dry season, presents the same bleached aspect that plains in Africa generally do when the grass has ripened. Travelling up along the right bank of the Mpokwa on the 21st, we came to the head of the stream, and the sources of the Mpokwa, issuing out of deep defiles enclosed by lofty ranges. The mbwala and the buffalo were plentiful. On the 22nd, after a march of 4 hours and a half, we came to the beautiful stream of the Mtambu, the water of which was sweet, and clear as crystal, and flowed northward. We saw for the first time the home of the lion and the leopard. Hear what Freiligarth says of the place: "Where the thorny brake and thicket densely filled the interspace of the trees, through whose thick branches never sunshine lights the place, there the lion dwells, a monarch, mightiest among the brutes. There his right to reign supremest, never one his claim disputes. There he layeth down to slumber, having slain and ta'en his fill. There he roameth, there he croucheth, as it suits his lordly will." We camped but a few yards from just such a place as the poet describes. The herd keeper who attended the goats and donkeys, soon after arrival in camp, drove the animals to water, and in order to obtain it they travelled through a tunnel in the brake, caused by elephants and rhinoceros. They had barely entered the dark canverous passage, when a black spotted leopard sprang, and fastened its fangs on the neck of one of the donkeys, causing it from pain to bray hideously. Its companions set up such a frightful chorus, and so lashed their heels in the air at the feline marauder, that the leopard bounded away through the brake, as if in sheer dismay at the noisy cries which the attack had provoked. The donkey's neck exhibited some frightful wounds, but the animal was not dangerously hurt. Thinking that possibly I might meet with an adventure with a lion or a leopard in that dark belt of tall trees, under whose impenetrable shade grew the dense thicket that formed such admirable coverts for the carnivorous species, I took a stroll along the awesome place with the gun bearer, Kalulu, carrying an extra gun, and further a supply of ammunition. We crept cautiously along, looking keenly into the deep dark dens, the entrances of which were revealed to us as we journeyed, expectant every moment to behold the reputed monarch of the brake and thicket, bound forward to meet us, and I took especial delight in picturing, in my imagination, the splendor and majesty of the wrathful brute, as he might stand before me. I peered closely into every dark opening, hoping to see the deadly glitter of the great angry eyes, and the glowering menacing front of the lion, as he would regard me. But alas! after an hour's search for adventure, I had encountered nothing, and I accordingly waxed courageous, and crept into one of these leafy, thorny caverns, and found myself shortly standing under a canopy of foliage that was held above my head fully 100 feet by the shapely and towering stems of the royal mavuli. Who can imagine the position? A smooth lawn like glade, a dense and awful growth of impenetrable jungle around us, those stately natural pillars, a glorious phalanx of royal trees, bearing at such sublime heights vivid green masses of foliage, through which no single sunray penetrated, while at our feet babbled the primeval brook, over smooth pebbles, in soft tones befitting the sacred quiet of the scene. Who could have desecrated this solemn, holy harmony of nature? But just as I was thinking it impossible that any man could be tempted to disturb the serene solitude of the place, I saw a monkey perched high on a branch over my head, contemplating, with something of an awestruck look, the strange intruders beneath. Well, I could not help it. I laughed loud and long, until I was hushed by the chaos of cries and strange noises which seemed to respond to my laughing. A troop of monkeys, hidden in the leafy depths above, had been rudely awakened, and, startled by the noise I made, were hurrying away from the scene with a dreadful clamor of cries and shrieks. Emerging again into the broad sunlight, I strolled further in search of something to shoot. Presently I saw, feeding quietly in the forest which bounded the valley of the Mtambu on the left, a huge reddish colored wild boar, armed with most horrid tusks. Leaving Kalulu crouched down behind a tree, and my solar helmet behind another close by, that I might more safely stalk the animal, I advanced towards him some 40 yards, and, after taking a deliberate aim, fired at his fore shoulder. As if nothing had hurt him whatever, the animal made a furious bound, and then stood with his bristles erected, and tufted tail curved over the back, a most formidable brute in appearance. While he was thus listening, and searching the neighborhood with his keen, small eyes, I planted another shot in his chest, which plowed its way through his body. Instead of falling, however, as I expected he would, he charged furiously in the direction the bullet had come, and as he rushed past me, another ball was fired, which went right through him. But still he kept on, until, within 6 or 7 yards from the trees behind which Kalulu was crouching down on one side, and the helmet was resting behind another, he suddenly halted, and then dropped. But as I was about to advance on him with my knife to cut his throat, he suddenly started up. His eyes had caught sight of the little boy, Kalulu, and were then, almost immediately afterwards, attracted by the sight of the snowy helmet. These strange objects on either side of him proved too much for the boar. He darted on one side into a thick brake, from which it was impossible to oust him, and as it was now getting late, and the camp was about 3 miles away, I was reluctantly obliged to return without the meat. On our way to camp we were accompanied by a large animal, which persistently followed us on our left. It was too dark to see plainly, but a large form was visible, if not very clearly defined. It must have been a lion, unless it was the ghost of the dead boar. That night, about 11 P.M., we were startled by the roar of a lion, in close proximity to the camp. Soon it was joined by another, and another still, and the novelty of the thing kept me awake.